Making headlines for this week of July 14th. G20 from hell. The West is losing relevance, and the East is replacing it. Assad can stay. U.S. agrees to truce, and France shifts its foreign policy to allow President of Syria to remain in power. Eventful energies. Several sources highlight coming period of intense energies affecting everything on Earth, and our conscious universe. More evidence to suggest that life is grander and more mysterious than we have been led to believe.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. In the aftermath of the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany, we will soon observe the consequences of what was discussed. We are going to observe this both in terms of the physical reality, but also in terms of the energetic shifts, which I will explain in a bit more detail shortly. In a contributing article picked up by Sputnik News, Pepe Escobar offered his insights on what he called the G20 from hell. In his article on July 9th, he reported that a future history of the G20 in Hamburg might start with a question posed by President Donald Trump, actually his speechwriter, a few days earlier in Warsaw. The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Escobar continues, the G20 as a whole was a noxious military dystopia disguised as a global summit. Welcome to hell and other assorted protests on multiple levels were sort of answering another Trump in Warsaw question. Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? These questions are what is called in English loaded, meaning that the wording can be interpreted in any way so that someone is able to claim the statement as truth. Let's explore this for a moment. The first statement on whether or not the West has the will to survive. From the perspective of the global cabal and those attached to the criminally fraudulent systems of law and banking, the will to survive appears to be coming in the form of pushing a stronger NATO alliance to stand up to Russia and other imaginary threats to their global hegemony. Secondly, the West cannot and will not survive in its current form because the fiat currency system is imploding due to an impossible ability to pay off the debt and the fact that the people of the world are becoming informed as to how they have been enslaved and manipulated by the global cabal on numerous levels. If the West wants to survive and remain relevant to any degree, they will have to surrender their hegemony of the world and allow a multipolar world to form, in alignment with a gold or resources-backed financial paradigm as a temporary transition to a world where money will no longer be needed as we currently know it. Regarding Trump's question in Poland, do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? Do we have the desire and courage to preserve our civilization? Let's look at this first. Currently, we live in a civilization that exists on the enslavement and control of humanity and the destruction of our planet for profit and power. Who has the desire to preserve this? I certainly do not, so I am not sure to whom he is directing this statement. The second part, in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it. Is the reference being made to the global elitists trying to maintain their control, or the people who are seeking to create their freedom from enslavement? The elitists can interpret a statement like this to suit their agenda, and the freedom-loving people can interpret this to support their desire for freedom from enslavement and control. Now, we need to find out to whom Trump was really directing the question. Escobar also adds this. While leaders worked The cosseted rooms gossiped, listened to the ode to joy, and indulged in the proverbial banquet. Outside there was burning and looting, a sort of vicious street-level commentary not only about their concept of civilization, but also about Trump in Warsaw conveniently forgetting to say that it's U.S. and NATO's policies which end up generating the terror blowback that threatens civilization, our values, and our will to survive. As long as the West was in control of the world with its unipolar hegemony, the world was, quote-unquote, peaceful, by whatever definition the cabal applies to that word. However, China and Russia are being increasingly viewed as a threat, and it is only because both countries took the corrupt Western financial system, used it to their advantage, and built up their infrastructure and gold reserves. And now they plan to turn the tables on the corrupt fractional reserve system. The global cabal knew that this day was coming. It could not be avoided. As I have reported in the past, there is absolutely no way this current system can keep going, and it is a massively leaking dam that is about to breach and destroy the dam unless the groundwork for the new financial model is laid down in preparation. History has shown over 1,000 years of different global reserve currencies rising up and coming to a maximum and then collapsing and needing to be replaced, and this will certainly not change. As I also mentioned on last week's newscast, China has very carefully planned these events to get even for the opium wars initiated by the UK and France that destroyed China. The writing is on the wall. Some European countries are resisting the additional sanctions against Russia. As Escobar also notes, for all practical purposes, what Chinese and German business interests do see further on down the road is Eurasia integration, with the 21st century New Silk Road, also known as the Belt and Road Initiative, starting in eastern China and ending in the Ruhr Valley. Now that's a practical definition of how a multilateral trade regime should work. Add to it the just clinched massive trade deal between the EU and Japan. For all practical purposes, geopolitically and geoeconomically, Germany is moving east. The BRICS nations, China, India, Russia, Brazil, and South Africa, met on the sidelines at the G20, and what else called for a rules-based, transparent, non-discriminatory, open, and inclusive multilateral trading system. Escobar pointed out something that CVN has been saying for a very long time regarding the migration crisis in Europe. He was describing how German Chancellor Merkel was able to win in certain negotiations, but she lost miserably when it came to the issue of mass migration. Escobar noted that no NATO power at the G20 would have had the balls or the courage to publicly connect the dots between ghastly U.S.-NATO wars in Afghanistan, Libya, and the Syrian proxy war, generating millions of refugees for whom the only hope is Europe. Stated bluntly, it has been the U.S.-NATO policy of destroying countries that has created the mass migration that is now being used to rip Europe apart. In a separate but related story to the migration crisis this week, an article appearing on the Zero Hedge website on July 15th reported that 2 weeks after Italy reacted with anger to Austria's deployment of troops and armored vehicles to the border between the two nations, while reactivating border controls at the Bremner Pass over concerns that Italy will be unable to handle the roughly 85,000 migrants and refugees who have entered the country so far in 2017, the Italian government has threatened to retaliate in a way that assures an imminent migrant crisis as well as an escalation of tensions between the two EU nations. According to the Times, an Italian minister and a senator have threatened to issue temporary EU visas to thousands of migrants in an effort to resolve Italy's escalating migrant and refugee crisis, which would then allow the refugees to travel north. The move, which has been described as a nuclear option, would allow the nearly 200,000 migrants currently stranded in Italy to travel across Europe using a Brussels directive loophole. So, the West invades and destroys countries and displaces millions. Those millions are then sent into European countries by an unelected EU leadership to destabilize them, and the taxpayers are forced to pay for them and to absorb the austerity measures resulting from the action. This gives a purpose and a meaning for NATO to remain in existence and in Europe. The destabilization may also be an attempt to prevent the mass movement of countries towards the Eastern Alliance, the new financial paradigm, and the Belt and Road Initiative. Coming back to NATO, however, in another article by John White appearing on the RT News website on July 15th, White reports that NATO is not an organization committed to promoting democratic values, as claimed, but to promoting Western hegemony, domination, and wherever the writ of the West is resisted or contested, regime change. The scale of human suffering wrought by Western imperialism is of such magnitude that it cannot possibly be quantified. In more recent times, since the end of the Second World War, words such as progress, civilization, and democracy have been used to justify what has been a perennial state of conflict and instability. In every part of the world, this imperialist juggernaut, led by Washington, has made its oppressive presence felt, undermining and destabilizing governments in the cause of an empire that wears the garb of democracy, but which, just like every empire there has been, is rooted in power and greed. NATO was established in 1949, just a year after the State of Israel was formally created, and this cannot be a coincidence. White also notes that it was in the context of a Cold War that pitted the Soviet bloc against a Western alliance in a struggle defined by two antagonistic economic systems and their accompanying ideologies, capitalism and communism. It was a global struggle which lasted over 4 decades, one that brought the planet close to nuclear Armageddon in the early 1960s and spawned a series of proxy conflicts throughout the developing world as countries such as Korea, Vietnam, Angola, and Nicaragua emerged from decades of Western U.S. colonial and imperialist domination to assert their right to self-determination. As the world is now coming to learn, and as I stated moments ago, military force has been used to remove leaders who refuse to play by the script of the global controllers. The economic hitmen are sent in, like John Perkins, to bribe and blackmail leaders. If this fails, then the military is sent in under some pre-planned agenda. White continues, the Western or capitalist bloc was and remains dominated by the United States, which, despite unleashing an ocean of propaganda designed to associate itself with words and concepts such as liberty, democracy, and human rights, the U.S. is a nation that has extended itself in destroying liberty, undermining democracy, and violating human rights in every corner of the globe. As the author William Bloom puts it in the preface of a 2014 edition of his best-selling and classic work, Rogue State, A Guide to the World's Only Superpower, Bloom states that the American empire has become the world's greatest threat, not only to peace, but, thanks to its military-industrial Wall Street complex, a threat to prosperity and to the environment as well. The empire has become the world's greatest weapon of mass destruction. Keep in mind also that the global cabal funds both sides of every conflict. Communist Russia came into being after the Khazarian Jews slaughtered over 60 million Russian Orthodox Christians in the revolution of 1917-18. The Khazarian Jews were also pushing for the Zionist creation of Israel, while also starting to take control of the United States and other Western countries. This, however, is all beginning to change. Thankfully, people are awakening worldwide to the lies, frauds, and crimes against humanity and our planet. They are becoming informed, and through their courage in critically questioning everything, they begin to influence others in their ability to think and question for themselves. With the shifting energies of the planet, we are also witnessing things being revealed in ways that have not occurred before in this lifetime. So we appear to be on the twilight of U.S. global hegemony in the world. But, coming back to Escobar's article for a moment, he writes in his closing comments that, in the medium term, it's fair to expect Germany to slowly but surely reapproach Russia. As much as Washington's unipolar moment may be fading fast, the Game of Thrones in the G20 realm is just beginning. In other geopolitical news, looking towards Syria for a moment, and it may appear that the West is giving up on its plan to remove President Bashar al-Assad from his leadership of Syria. This would suggest some pretty major things happening behind the scenes that the world has not yet been informed of. In an article appearing on Sputnik News on July 15th, the story states that, speaking to reporters after talks with President Trump this week, French President Emmanuel Macron said that Paris's Syria stance no longer includes the removal of President Bashar al-Assad from power as a priority. Russian observers say the about-face is significant, serving as the first inkling of a new paradigm in French Middle Eastern policy. Macron was quoted as saying that we have changed the French doctrine with regard to Syria. Our fundamental task now is to eradicate terrorist groups, no matter where they are. Again, this is a statement that is open for interpretation because the world has never been clearly informed as to who the real terrorist is. The West and the Western media would say that terrorists are Daesh or Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, or any one of several other groups. Yet, these groups are funded and trained by the U.S., Israel, and Western interests. Leaders and media of the West claim that Assad is a bad leader and needs to be removed. Yet, the West removed Saddam Hussein from Iraq because he threatened to sell his oil in euros and not US dollars. Gaddafi was removed as leader of Libya because he was proposing a gold-backed financial system for Africa, and he offered benefits to the people of his country that would put the West to shame. At least several YouTube videos feature confessions from U.S. soldiers saying that it was really they, the soldiers of the U.S. and of Western countries, that were the terrorists. So, to whom is Macron referring when he says terrorist? That is the question. The article also noted that, in turn, President Trump said that Washington was working on a second truce in Syria with Moscow, emphasizing that the first ceasefire was made possible only thanks to earlier Russian-U.S. contacts. Russian officials have reacted to President Macron's remarks with a cautious sense of optimism. Senate Foreign Affairs Committee Deputy Head Vladimir Yabarov said that a real opportunity has emerged, perhaps for the first time, to unite the efforts of the Syrian army, the Russian aerospace forces, and the Western coalition in the fight against terrorism in Syria. The article also noted the following. For his part, Senate Foreign Affairs Committee head Konstantin Kosachev said that Macron's about-face was a sign that a new French president, or rather that the new French president, is looking to return his country to world politics as a major player. Still, he added that this wonderful and long-awaited piece of news will now require concrete proposals for cooperation to move forward. Kosachev welcomed the creation of a working group, but only on the conditions that the proposal is genuine and that it does not undermine the negotiation processes in Geneva and Astana. Stanislav Tarasov, a well-known Russian specialist in Middle East studies, was quoted in the article as saying that we see that Macron's France, unlike the France of his predecessor Hollande, is beginning to develop a new paradigm for France's foreign policy in the Middle East. Former President Hollande practically did not have a policy, choosing instead to toe the line of the Americans in a servile position. Paris did not even have its own clear position regarding Assad. At this point, however, it is all just words, and it remains to be seen whether or not Macron and France really intend to move forward in what appears to be a bolder direction in its foreign policy, and to reassert France as a major player in global affairs instead of being a puppet to U.S. demands. On a broader, more spiritual level, however, perhaps the energies are bringing about significant change in perhaps unexpected ways, and as I said earlier, I'll be addressing more on this shortly. In financial news, for those having the eyes, the ears, and the hearts to see, hear, and feel, as well as the open mind to interpret, one should be able to conclude that we are on the verge of very profound changes upon our planet. The fiat currency fractional reserve model of banking is imploding, and the movement is on away from the worthless US dollar, and indeed also away from all worthless fiat currencies. Former U.S. Congressman, presidential candidate, and host of the Liberty Report, Dr. Ron Paul, appeared recently on World Alternative Media, offering an interview to host Josh Sigurdson. In some excerpts from the interview, Paul offers his assessment on what he sees unfolding at this time.
The fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system, so we can't put an exact date on it, but we know a fiat dollar crash is coming. Recently, Janet Yellen claimed that we will not see another major crisis in our lifetime, despite the unthinkable debt printing, devaluation, and inflation. So, what are your thoughts on this delusion, Dr. Paul?
Well, it scares me because central bankers are always wrong on their predictions, especially right before a bust. So what she says shouldn't reassure anybody, and you're right, you can't predict the timing. The other day I was being interviewed, and I said I wouldn't be shocked if the bust comes by the end of this year. And some people wanted it to say that that's what I was predicting, but I think you asked the question correctly. You can know about a bust, you can know about a correction, you can know about all the sins of overspending and printing of money, but there is a subjective element to when people give up confidence, and that's what you're talking about. When is the day going to come when people become more realistic and realize that dealing with money that has no intrinsic value to it, there's too much debt, too much malinvestment, and it will come to an end. Something that's too good to believe, it usually is, and it usually ends, and that's what we have to anticipate. But one thing for sure, we're getting closer every day, and it may come this year, but it might take another year or two, because, the politicians have a way of promising. And one reason why this bubble and our bubble that's driven by the dollar exists is because we are the reserve currency of the world. We are the richest country in the world. We have a military power standing behind us. So a lot of people put trust in that, and we're involved. We sort of control the financial system. But the real test is, can it sustain unbelievable deficit financing and the accumulation of debt? And it can't. You can't run a world. If that were the case, Americans could just sit back and say, hey, what the heck? Everybody wants our money, so we'll take our money. And that's the reason your assumption is correct. It will come to an end. The more we can get prepared personally, as well as prepare individuals to understanding what's going on, so they might pick the right course after that big calamity hits.
I wanted to go into this implementation of a cashless system that we're watching in India, we're watching in Australia, China, in Canada to a good degree, where there seems to be this massive push to go cashless. And I've always seen this as kind of enslavement to the banking system, because if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks, through digital transactions, and you never hold it, does that not mean you are in servitude to the banking system? So I was wondering your thoughts on this cashless society, and if we have to worry possibly about having this be implemented into the special drawing rights at the IMF.
Well, I think this notion and what's happening is going more to cash, and India's doing that, but we're doing it too. There's a lot less cash being used in this country. I think it's a sign of the weakening of the system. It's also a sign that the authoritarians are clinging to power, and that means they have to know what everybody's doing, where everybody's money is, so that they can collect the revenues, collect the taxes, and make sure that you're not getting around the system. So that's what the cashless society is all about. But it won't work. Matter of fact, it might be the precipitating factor that people will eventually lose confidence when the crisis hits, because just in the they talk about, well, the crisis hasn't come. Well, you know, in 08 and 09 was a pretty major crisis. The one thing we learned there was that the middle class got wiped out and the poor people got poorer, and now there's a lot of wealth going on, but it's still accumulating to the wealthy individual. That will continue, but eventually the cashless society will prompt people to be very knowledgeable about, well, we have to keep something out for this. So the governments actually make things worse, because people do prepare for bartering and trading, and of course pure bartering is horrible, but if you have silver coins, it might tide you over a lot better. And people say, well, it might not come for another 10 years. Well, we don't know whether it's necessary. But one thing for sure, when a government embarks on deficit financing and then monetizing the debt, the value of commodities, especially gold and silver, generally goes up. I recognized this in 1971 and started buying gold at that time. And some people made fun of me, and they still do, and say, oh, yeah, but you're missing out on the stock market boom. But, you know, if you look at gold at $35 an ounce and now at $12.50 an ounce, it wasn't the worst form of protection, and I think that will continue. It won't be a tragedy if you get protected and the calamity isn't quite as bad as you think, but I think it's still a good way. I still expect that this system will not last. It will collapse. It always has in the past, and 6,000 years of history shows that, you know, fiat money and cryptocurrencies, I do not believe that it can replace gold and silver.
No, it can't, and people should diversify, and I think people look to cryptocurrencies partly to invest rather than insurance of wealth with gold and silver. But just switching gears, you mentioned last year in an interview with RT that the shadow government may attempt to stage false flag attacks to bring Trump into war. We've seen more and more fear-mongering regarding Russia as the military-industrial complex seems to be getting ready for a global conflict and using the media to prop up their intentions. We've seen what appeared to be an obvious false flag attack in Syria, and now there is allegedly intelligence that for absolutely no reason at all, Assad plans to shoot himself in the foot by gassing more children. This is insanity, Dr. Paul. How can anyone believe this narrative, and what do you think is going on?
Well, I guess people get brainwashed, and the people who totally depend on the mainstream media will hear it over and over. And when you think about bashing Russia right now, or Iran, is so overwhelming that it's bipartisan too. Yes, the two parties argue back and forth, but on the major issues of the Federal Reserve, monetizing debt, and the continued building up of the military and us policing the world, they don't really argue about that. I mean, the military budget just passed, I think, yesterday in the House or the Senate. There's never a problem with that. Usually there are about 20 of us that would oppose that, but that will continue. But it's a psychological thing that people accept unless they come and listen to more programs like what you have and read the right things on the internet, because right now we have a better chance of counteracting these false notions than we ever had before. Because when I started in politics, you had three major networks and there was a total monopoly. Now it's more challenging. I saw something interesting yesterday, and I happen to believe the story. They said that one of the reasons that Hillary lost was she was construed as the war candidate and Trump was the peace candidate. And we could, digest that a bit. But that is true. There's usually one who seemed to be more for peace, and Trump, talked about friendship with Russia and these things like that. And Hillary had a record. And I do believe that people are on our side on the war issue, and they're on our side on central banking and how the military-industrial complex rips us off and how corporatism really hurts the people. But the problem that we face is philosophic and educational, because they say, well, that's the free enterprise system. That's capitalism that gave us what you're complaining about. And that isn't true. What we have now is government welfare interventionism that gave us a problem. And we have to prove to them that free markets is quite a bit different than what is happening and why there's such a discrepancy in wealth distribution. That principally has come about because of monetary policy by the Federal Reserve.
The link to the full interview will be in the show transcript for this story. As you heard moments ago, Ron Paul spoke of expecting a crash to occur in the fiat system, at least this year and possibly sometime next year at the latest. He also described how he himself began preparing. The BRICS alliance of countries led by Russia and China have been preparing for this since at least 2010. I reported earlier how both countries took advantage of the fiat system for their benefit and how they will be able to reap the rewards because they focused on their infrastructure instead of external wars for profit, as the West has done. An RT article on July 14th has reported that trade between Moscow and Beijing has increased significantly in the first 6 months of the year, according to the Chinese Customs Administration. Through June, trade between Russia and China was worth $39.78 billion. Russian exports increased 29.3% to $20.34 billion, while Chinese exports to Russia were up 22.2% to $19.4 billion. In 2016, trade between Moscow and Beijing grew only 2.2% to $69.5 billion. The countries have set a goal to boost trade to $200 billion by 2020. Arguably, the biggest reason for this major increase is due to the fact that Russia and China no longer use the US dollar as the currency of exchange for their trading. As a result, the US banking cabal is not able to steal money through the foreign exchange process. The article continues. In July, the Russian Direct Investment Fund and the China Development Bank agreed to establish a Russian-Chinese investment fund worth 68 billion yuan, or $10 billion. It was created to make settlements in ruble and yuan easier. Both Moscow and Beijing have repeatedly talked about the importance of payments in local currencies for bilateral trade. The agreement was signed at a meeting between President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping while he was in Russia on an official visit recently, just before the G20. The countries are also jointly building the Power of Siberia gas pipeline and a liquefied natural gas facility on the Yamal Peninsula in the Russian Arctic. Over the past year, Russia has overtaken Saudi Arabia as China's top oil supplier. China is building a new transport corridor to Europe as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, also known as the Silk Road, which goes through Kazakhstan and Russia to Europe. If one only listens to the Western business pundits, they hear that the Chinese economy is in recession or something similar. Clearly, two countries that are moving forward in heavy banking, trading, and investment partnerships are clearly not affected by Western sanctions, nor the fraudulent fiat currency models. In general news now, over the coming weeks and months, numerous sources are pointing to massively shifting energies that have the potential to prepare humanity further for this experience that some define as ascension, or whether people will fall back into third density patterns relating to fear and all the negative energies that the global cabal is seeking to create in our world at this time. I'd like to share this month's energy update from Lee Harris. He also speaks to the increasing energies at this time and the impact that it is having upon us and how we have the choice to use these incoming energies. We are being changed and prepared. Our physical bodies are changing, mostly in ways that the vast majority of people are not yet ready to understand, even though they may feel it or sense it on some level. Here is part of what Harris shared this month.
The summer energies are particularly high frequency, unique, and a whole new shade of intense. So we're a multidimensional planet and we are a multidimensional people, which means none of us are ever going through the same things in exactly the same way. But there is a very interesting energy movement going on now through the whole of the summer, and it's particularly piercing in energy. So it's high frequency, it's full glare, it can take you either way. So the highs of the coming 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for you guys, so through to mid and late August, are going to be you feeling very, very alive, very charged with energy, ideas, visions, and feeling a joy in your body at what you're sensing the future holds for you, for others. There will be those of you who will almost seem, to some people around you, insanely happy, positive, or joyous. And this is not a big surprise, because if you look at what's going on in the world right now, there is a lot to be unhappy about or afraid of if you go there. And this is the big key for those of you who consider yourselves light workers, awakened beings. I was working with one of the people I'm mentoring today, and at the end of her session I channeled for her for about 10 minutes, and the Z's were very clear, my guides, about the difference between, say, an enlightened being and a light worker. And they were saying that, there are certain enlightened beings on the planet who are completely free of the human game, if you like, the ego, the construct of all of this, and duality. But there aren't that many of them. And they're holding a particular frequency and managing to disseminate that into the collective in rarefied and rare areas. Then they said there are those of you who are light workers and who tread that middle ground, somewhere between the sky and the stars and the earth. And depending on your day of the week, or depending on where you are in your own process, you might be feeling really great and really alive and really free, or very fast going through something that's intense, almost microscopic inside you emotionally. So it could be, yes, an old thing from before. So many of us will think about, okay, childhood issues, childhood pains, childhood wounds, family dynamics, relationship dynamics. But there is something going on this summer that is far bigger than all of that. Those 3D focused timelines are beginning to dissolve in a collective way, meaning time is becoming faster and more circular. So to people who are already a little bit non-linear time, and you're used to feeling different dimensions, different spaces, that's going to go into overdrive. And this can do one of two things to you. It can create that high state that I just spoke about, which sometimes we live in for a few weeks, sometimes it's a few hours, a few days, but those injections are usually very joyous to the human being. It's a great thing to feel really alive, really awake, having all these ideas. But you also have to surrender to the other side of the coin. We are on a dualistic planet, and we do have the highs and the lows, and somewhere in the middle is the balance point, the point that most people crave, desire. Certainly the people, you guys watching this video, of course, we have many people on the planet who like the highs and the lows only, and they like to stay in one of those extremes, and that's part of their path, part of their pattern. But for you guys watching this who are feeling a little burnt out, a little exhausted, certainly those of you who are healers with burnout, there was a big message about healers with burnout. You have to remember that going through this dance is very focused. So if you are going through intense stuff, remind yourself, A, you will come out the other side, and this too shall pass. That can be very helpful to your mind, which when in full-on victim consciousness, which can feel very justified. You know, if you're having a really rough time in your life and you're feeling tough emotionally, the script of your mind tends to be telling you a lot of negative or difficult stuff. It can be very important when you're having those moments to say, this too shall pass, but also to do a checklist of what are you doing in your world to support yourself. And that leads me to this summer. Because it is going to be a very fast and intense time, you will want to create more space for yourself. You will want to make sure that you're being disciplined around creating little pockets of space or time for you where you do things that fill you up if you are in a stressful situation in your life right now. Mental confusion will be normal, whether you're on the high side or the low side. Things are going so much faster that we are literally experiencing ourselves and the planet as new. So many prophecies spoke of this time and the intensity of this time and the darkness that this time would also reveal to us, both outside and showing us our own darknesses, the parts of ourselves that we get now the opportunity to heal, move beyond, clear. But to get to the other side of this period is why we're going through it. So I know it can be very easy for us, and I have the same experience, to get caught up in the fear, to get caught up in the overstimulation that we are being constantly invited to. But this summer, if you can actually use it as a period of time to say, I'm going to listen to myself, I'm going to intuitively listen to what I need to do. I'm going to trust that in each moment, if I quiet my mind and I get present more, so rather than always doing or always filling the mind, if I can take moments throughout the day where I just get present and sit silently for 5 minutes, that strong, light-filled voice of intuition can be louder than ever before. That's what this summer is really offering, but it does require stepping out of what you might call the matrix. So the standard operating procedure of humanity, certainly up until now. So you will have to take those times away. You will have to, if you're busy, take short 10, 15-minute bursts here and there. If you're busy and you don't really need to be, but you're just holding yourself to an overly busy schedule, create some space in it, because this is going to be a very important listening time this summer, and it will be very fast as well. The opportunity for you to make changes inside yourself and create changes outside yourself. So what I'm saying is twofold, and I apologize to those of you who are in winter right now going, it's winter, Lee, not summer. It's me getting tuned into here. Take this time to experience your own personal upgrade. Take the time to nurture yourself through the times that is uncomfortable, and be a good friend to yourself when you want to kick yourself because you're down, or be annoyed at yourself because things aren't going the way you want. That's just old ego stuff that you're having an opportunity to release, but the key is to love and support yourself through those difficult times as you would a friend. Regarding what the Z's said earlier this morning, what it reminded me was, no matter how much light you focus on, no matter how much you invoke it, no matter how much you meditate, focus on the light, you have to detox the dark. You have to detox the density. This summer provides a very microscopic opportunity to do that in a more effortless way than ever before. It will be effortful if you are doing it through circumstance, relationships, and action. It will be less effortful if you can step back from those things, circumstance, relationship, and action, and keep checking in with yourself every day. The voice of your soul will be a lot easier to hear in these coming 5-6 weeks if you're able to give yourself the space to do it. So it's a special time. It's fast time. It's a time like we've never seen before, but that's going to be the story for all of us for the rest of our days. So if you find yourself getting remorseful about the past or fearful about the future, remember you only have today. Any of us only really have today in this moment, and through the moment that is today, we're experiencing everything all at once.
For those who understand and have faith in the science behind astrology, Carl Boudreau is also offering information about the planetary alignments that are supporting massive energetic shifts at this time, including at least one major eclipse coming in August. Boudreau was asked about the energies relating to the harmonic convergence that took place back in 1987 compared to the convergence of energies of the current time. Boudreau explained it this way. If the harmonic convergence chart of 1987 is about wealth building, the August 2017 eclipse charts appear to be about spiritualization. We have seen what decades of unbridled emphasis on the creation, preservation, and consolidation, the monopolization of wealth and power by the 1%, we can see what this has done to the world. However, to fully understand the meaning of harmonic convergence and of August's eclipses and the relationship between them, we probably must understand the astrological pattern that began emerging in the early 1970s, what I have called the oligarchic alignment. This alignment concentrated planetary power in the houses of the 1%, Libra through Pisces, and formed the astrological basis for an extreme concentration of economic and political power in the hands of the 1%. Essentially, then, what I referred to as the oligarchic alignment was a setup for the rise of global oligarchy. The wealthy and powerful, aided immensely by the oligarchic alignment, were well positioned to exploit the grand trine of the harmonic convergence to expand and further consolidate their wealth and power in the years before and after the harmonic convergence. Basically, in the early 1970s, the powerful outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, began settling into the last 6 signs of the zodiac, Libra through Pisces, the signs that govern the 99%. This alignment built up and persisted until roughly 2010, a period of 40 years. During these 40 years, between 1970-71 and the year 2010-11, the placement of powerful outer planets in the signs of the 1% were heavily empowering the 1%. Accordingly, during those years, wealth and power accumulated heavily in the hands of the 1%. Coming when it did in the late 1980s, the harmonic convergence would have capped off the political and economic empowerment of the 99%. All 3 powerful outer planets would have been in their signs. This, however, is starting to change. Now, that was Boudreau who was reporting on all that, and I'm saying now that this is starting to change. I reported on Boudreau's astrology posting from 5 or 6 months ago, I think, about the movement of planets away from benefiting the 1% to now benefiting the 99%. Continuing on with Boudreau, he states that the oligarchic alignment began to unravel in earnest around 2010-2011, when Uranus entered Aries. When Uranus entered Aries, it left the oligarchic alignment. When it entered Aries, Uranus began its long sweep of the houses of the 99%, Aries through Virgo. And to my eye, or this is Boudreau's eye, the influence of Uranus in Aries has been increasingly apparent among the 99% as a tendency toward reform and resistance since then. If the oligarchic alignment and the harmonic convergence are responsible for the political and economic power imbalance in the world, and the oligarchic alignment is slowly unraveling, it seems reasonable to suspect that the eclipses of August 2017 will be part of this unraveling. Thus, August's eclipse, or both of them rather, would mark an important point in the unraveling of the oligarchic alignment and the global oligarchy as it brought into existence. August's eclipses would be a counterpoint to the harmonic convergence. And from the look of the composite chart for August's eclipses, that does indeed appear to be what is happening. Boudreau points to the positions of several planets and stars and the profound impact that he expects from these energies. The coming alignment of the star Sirius, which Boudreau says governs the spiritual hierarchy of the Earth, in alignment with Venus, the energies of love, in the zodiac sign of Leo, which focuses on the alignment of the personality and the higher self. In this sense, there is going to be massive shifting within people to deal with their issues, but also there will be a burning away of the mundane within geopolitics and geoeconomics. Boudreau adds that currently, corrupt oligarchic values govern nurturance. Extreme political and economic inequality is the ideal and the goal. But the precise Sirius-Ceres conjunction speaks of the spiritualization of the principles governing nurturance as it is now found on our planet. Thus, when all three bodies, Venus, Sirius, and Ceres, are taken into account, the grouping at the apex of the kite suggests that the eclipses of August will trigger the spiritualization of the global economic and political order. The eclipses will trigger events that replace the system of gross inequality of wealth and power we currently have, and replace it with a system characterized by an equitable, fair distribution of power and wealth. With all of this, there is potentially a lot to look forward to over the coming months, as long as one is able to stay grounded enough to know that whatever chaos or disruptions arise, it will all pass, and each soul will be called to stand in one's truth during this time, and to avoid falling into fear as much as possible, and focus more on grounding the higher energies of love, peace, compassion, forgiveness, kindness, generosity, and any energy that is generally life-honoring. Over to some science-related news now. Since we seem to be following a theme this week of consciousness of mind, body, and universe, there is this possibly relevant report. Thankfully, there are people who are informed on topics such as these and can try to help explain them, even when there is currently no explanation. A report on July 13th had suggested that there was high energetic activity taking place beyond Earth. In most cases, people might first think that our sun was sending out some solar flares and solar winds towards Earth. The problem this time, however, is that this source is reporting that there has not been any activity of an unusual nature coming from the sun.
July 13th, Thursday, 8:45 Mountain Time, 2017. It's a space weather alert. The alert is for a Type 4 radio emission, dated July 14th, 02:02 Universal Time. These types of alerts are in association with major eruptions on the sun and are typically associated with strong coronal mass ejections and solar radiation storms. Oddly enough, we've been watching a disturbance in the ionosphere on two instruments. This one here is from the Space Weather Prediction Center. This is the D region absorption. And you can see there are some intense moments over the last hour and a half, 2 hours. Some very recently, like you're seeing right here, that is very long duration. That is very odd. I'm going to take you now to the one out of Japan, showing the same thing. So they're in agreement. The ionosphere is definitely feeling something, and the sun has nothing to offer. No coronal holes, no coronal mass ejections, and no radiation storms that I'm aware of. We look at the solar wind. It's very meager at the moment. You can see a decline over the last day and a half. It's flatlined, to be quite honest with you. This just doesn't make any sense. Go back and look at space weather, and you can see the numbers yourself. 366 solar wind, that's very low. Protons, the density at 4, it's very normal. The radio sun's at 91, That's actually low. Magnetic field at a negative 1.7, that's barely open. So still, it wouldn't constitute an alert like we're seeing right now. It just doesn't make any sense. Where is this energy coming from? It's coming from this? Honestly, that looks just exactly like a red dwarf that NASA has released a photo that shows what two red dwarfs look like. We do seem to have something else near the sun. This is from back in 2012. But this was just recently, within the last 3 days, something near the sun yet again. And I'm beginning to think that we definitely have something up in the cosmos. There's something out there. And I think that's the culprit of this solar wind that we're seeing. There's nothing to trace it back to. And they've issued a Type 4 radio emission alert. Just doesn't make any sense. There is definitely, right there it is again, something disturbing the ionosphere. And it doesn't look like it's the sun. So guys like me and a lot of other people, we ask, what is it? We just try to piece this puzzle together as we move forward. When I see things like this, it doesn't make sense. There is no space weather. Not right now. Why am I seeing space weather? Why are there alerts being issued? For what? And from what?
Is our universe being energetically prepared for some kind of celestial energetic event? This is hard to confirm at this time, although it cannot be completely dismissed either. The source says he intends to keep following this story, but as of this moment he is having a hard time explaining where this energy is coming from, that is giving the readings that some are receiving and that others are feeling due to their sensitivity. Perhaps more will follow on this possible story as details become available. While unusual things appear to be happening beyond Earth at this time, an article appearing on the Futurism.com website on June 24th is asking whether our universe may be conscious. Many, and perhaps most of you, probably just had the thought, so what else is new? Tell me something I don't already know. Or, duh, it's about time science got this fundamental truth straightened out. It may be obvious to many of us, but there are still many, and hopefully new CVN listeners who may need to be reminded of this or introduced to this idea. According to the article, physicist Gregory Matloff has published a paper that argues that the entire universe may be capable of consciousness. This concept, called panpsychism, is speculative, but there are many who wish to perform further research on it. For centuries, modern science has been shrinking the gap between humans and the rest of the universe. From Isaac Newton showing that one set of laws applies equally to falling apples and orbiting moons, to Carl Sagan intoning that we are made of star stuff, that the atoms of our bodies were literally forged in the nuclear furnaces of other stars. Even in that context, Gregory Matloff's ideas are shocking. The veteran physicist at New York City College of Technology recently published a paper arguing that humans may be like the rest of the universe in substance and in spirit. A proto-consciousness field could extend through all of space, he argues. Stars may be thinking entities that deliberately control their paths. Put more bluntly, the entire cosmos may be self-aware. In this context, the question of consciousness is now being explored more at the macro level of human awareness, the cosmic level. In an academic paper from 2013, James Beekler explored the neurocosmological basis of consciousness and spirituality. In his paper, he wrote the following: Great strides have been made in the neurosciences over the past few years, especially in the areas of neurophysiology and neurophysics. In fact, the area of research called neurophysics has only emerged as a viable branch of physics in the past decade or two. The object of these researches go beyond just discovering how the brain functions, but to actually discover the neural correlates of mind and consciousness. On the other hand, developing the physical models of consciousness from the opposite direction of a theoretical rather than an experimental or observational direction has also become popular over the past few decades. Together, these two approaches have raised the possibility that science will soon understand enough about mind and consciousness to answer important questions that have haunted philosophical thought and metaphysical speculations for several millennia, the most important of which might be how does human consciousness emerge within the brain, and what is the relationship between consciousness and the greater universe. These questions represent perhaps the greatest and the most important mysteries of all science because they define who we are, where we have been, and where we are going as an intelligent species. Buechler also adds that the answers could also tell us how we as individuals and as a species relate to the universe as a whole. It is at this point that physics and physical cosmology enter the study because it has traditionally been the science of physics that studies and tries to determine what it is that we observe and otherwise sense as reality. The smallest viable living unit is the cell, and the neuron is the particular cell associated with mind and the brain. However, neurons extend throughout our bodies to make up the nervous system that carries signals from the external world to our brain and from our brain back to the various muscles and organs in our bodies. Not only do neurons extend throughout our bodies, but there are a disproportionately large quantity of neurons in the heart. Only in the heart does the density of neurons approach that of the brain. Buechler points out that if mind and consciousness emerge from the vast net of neurons in the brain, as all scientists think, then mind and consciousness must extend throughout the rest of the body, as do the neurons. Consciousness is thus also explored at a microcellular level in this context, the levels of the neurons within the human body. Consciousness is being shown beyond current human understanding on both a macro and micro level, and we are now beginning to link the macro with the micro. In a video from November of 2016, scientist and author Greg Braden continues his work in linking the spiritual component of human existence with science, exploring the connection between the heart and mind through coherence, and exploring humanity's connection to a larger, unified field.
Whether we're talking about the indigenous people of the high deserts of the Americas, through the Yucatan, in southern Mexico, or into the Andes of Bolivia and Peru, all through the Sinai traditions and the Coptic traditions and the pre-Christian traditions, the Buddhist and Tibetan traditions, they all say that we are part of all that we see, that we are deeply connected to our bodies, we're deeply connected to the world, and that we have the ability to influence, and this is important, not to control, not to manipulate, but we have the ability to influence the outcome of events in our lives, in our communities, in our families, and in our world. And they apply those principles in what to us look like miraculous forms of healing, for example. We've seen examples of this through the medicineless hospitals in Tibet and through the healers in the Andes. What looks like miraculous disappearance of tumors, for example. Some are visible outside the body, some inside the body, in a matter of hours. And to modern science, because we're conditioned to believe that we're separate from our world, there's nothing that allows for that connection and that influence, so to us we call it a miracle. It's only a miracle until we understand the connection, and then it becomes a technology. What they found is that there is a connection between our heart and our brain. They learned the techniques to manage and create effects in their bodies, in the world around them. When we look into the laboratory, it parallels very closely what our own scientists are finding now, and intuitively what we all know, positive emotions such as care, gratitude, appreciation, compassion. Those kinds of emotions in our bodies set up a conversation between our heart and our brain. It's a two-way conversation. And when that conversation is optimum, we call it coherence, optimum coherence. Coherence can be measured with conventional equipment. Electrical and magnetic energy between the heart and the brain can be measured. Optimum coherence is a very low frequency, 0.10 hertz. The fundamental heartbeat of the earth 7.8 hertz. So the fundamental coherence, the optimum coherence between our heart and our brain is less than 1 of the. It's the signals that whales communicate with, actually, and military submarines to some degree. That's why it's a problem for the whales. So it's a really low frequency that we set up between our heart and our brain. When I was in school, we were taught that the brain is the master organ in the body. We know the brain's important. The brain is not the master organ. It receives its signals from the heart. And there's a reluctance to teach that in our classrooms today. But the quality of the feelings in the heart are what send the signal and trigger the brain to release whatever chemistry it releases into the body. So our ancestors knew that. And I'm not saying they knew it from a scientific perspective or used the word coherence, but they knew how to incorporate these relationships into what we would call prayer, for example. I had an experience here in northern New Mexico in the early 1990s. I write about in a couple of the books. A native friend of mine asked me if I wanted to join him during one of the worst droughts in the history of the Southwest in a prayer of rain. I had an expectation. I thought I would see some native dancing and chanting and, something like that. So I met my friend. We walked through over 100,000 acres of the most beautiful high desert sage into an ancient stone circle that he said is so old, no one knows who built it, but he said that the stones are right where his ancestors placed these stones in a time before anyone knows. My friend's name was David. I watched David. He sat down. He took his old work boots off. He stepped naked feet into this stone circle. And I wasn't prepared for what I saw next. He closed his eyes. He turned his back to me, held his hands in a prayer mudra for just a few seconds. And then he said, I'm hungry. You want to go get a bite to eat? And I said, yeah. But I thought you were going to pray for rain. And he looked right at me and he said, no. He said, if I prayed for rain could never happen. Because the moment you pray for something to happen, you've just acknowledged it doesn't exist. And you may be empowering the very condition you're hoping to change. I said, if you didn't pray for rain just now, what did you just do? He said, when I closed my eyes, he said, I felt the feeling of what it feels like when it rains. He says, I felt the feeling of my naked feet in the mud of our Pueblo village, and the mud's there because we've had so much rain. And he said, I smelled the smells of what it smells like when the rain falls off the earthen walls of our Pueblo homes. He incorporated his physical senses into the prayer as if what he wanted to experience was already present. He was giving thanks for the rain that was already there. Now, I can't prove this scientifically. We went to town, to Taos, New Mexico. We had a bite to eat, and by the time I got back to my home that evening, something was happening that I hadn't seen, no one had for a long time. Big black clouds were moving in over the mountains, and it started to rain that night. And it rained and rained and rained. It rained all night, it rained all morning, it rained all afternoon. The next day it rained. The roads were washed out, cattle were stranded, crops were flooded. It rained so much there was no place for the rain to go. And I called my friend David on the phone, and I said, what's going on? What's this all about? And he was quiet just for a minute, and he kind of chuckled. He said, that's the part of the prayer that the elders could never figure out. They could bring the rain, they couldn't tell it how long to rain or how much rain to have. So there's a difference between asking for something to happen and working toward that outcome and praying for it to happen and claiming it and feeling as if it already exists. It's a subtle and powerful difference in quantum physics. Apparently it makes all the difference in the world. It is the ability to incorporate all of the physical senses, knowing that we're part of the world, not separate from it, and feel what we would like to experience so that it can happen, rather than asking for it to come, acknowledging that it's not there. That is a subtle and powerful difference, and it's something I find almost universally in the ancient traditions. And we spent time in the Coptic monasteries in the Egyptian desert, for example, with the shaman in the Andes of Bolivia and Peru. We see exactly, they use different language, see exactly the same thing. If they want something to occur, if they want a healing to occur, they come from the place that healing has already happened. And that is an example of almost uniform wisdom that our ancestors had. And when we began to feel separate from the world, we were told that we were powerless. And the false science tells us that. It says, We're random beings. Life is random. We're separate from our bodies. We're separate and powerless in our world. And so we're conditioned to feel helpless in the world. And it's one of the places I think there's a lot that can be learned from our indigenous ancestors.
It is becoming more and more my personal belief that energy, frequency, vibration, DNA, consciousness, heart, love, peace, and life are becoming more and more interconnected as human awareness continues to evolve. It is even possible that these terms are also becoming important keys for humanity to focus upon in the coming future as the planetary energies continue to rise, so that less humans are drawn into the tricks, treats, and traps of the global cabal seeking to keep its control of humanity. Over the coming weeks, I hope to be able to explore this in a little more detail. Finally, in health-related news, the current time we are in appears to be guiding humans who are ready to move more into a space of feeling and being. While attending the workshop in the Netherlands last weekend with Jennifer Hoffman, I met a gentle soul there named Joseph Blazer. Joseph describes his service for humanity as being the alchemy of touch and invites clients to feel who you are. In this audio clip, he shares a bit about himself and his service for humanity.
My name is Joseph Blazer, and I'm living in Utrecht. My practice is at the Kanaalweg 93E. I'm practicing rebalancing. I do essence massage, I do essence coaching, and I'm giving foot consultancy. When I was young, I was very much interested into healing. I was into herbs, and I made elixirs, herbal elixirs for healing for people. And I was working in the garden of an old anthroposophic woman, which teach me my first steps into healing. It was foot massage and metamorphic massage, and from that on, I was getting more and more into healing arts. And from that on, I was also getting interested in deep body work. So I was already a long time into meditation and self-exploration and personal development. I was going to an ashram in India to learn rebalancing, deep body work. That way I also worked there in sessions. I gave sessions already. And from one came the other. So it started off with being interested in healing arts, and I started in these healing herbs and elixir, and from that on I was more getting interested into all kinds of body work, shiatsu, acupressure, rebalancing, rolfing. I also got American teacher from California, Jack Painter called. And there I learned postural integration and energetic integration. And that is derived from Neo-Reichian breath work. So that's the difference from massage. Massage is usually more about touch. And this is more about really going deep into the structures, going really deep into the muscles and making the joints loose, and working also with the emotional body and the mental body and the spiritual body at the same time. So it's an approach which you can call holistic body work. So it's not only like physiotherapy, only touching the physical body, but it all encompasses the whole body, the four bodies.
When we speak of rebalancing, you have said it is similar to rolfing.
Yes.
So in a typical rebalancing session, when you are working with an individual and attempting to unlock or release this tension, what might be a typical experience? What might a person wanting to learn more, what might he or she want to know about what to expect? What might one expect with this kind of treatment?
Actually, it's freeing all the bodies, the emotional body, the physical body, the mental body, and the spiritual body from contractions. That means all the energy which is entangled and present in this tension is getting released, and then your body, all your bodies become more fluid, and your life force and life energy is more freed and starts moving. And that means also that your potential is becoming free. And that means also that you realize that you are a divine being in a physical body, and also that you experience your ecstatic potential. When you connect all these bodies together and integrate that, you are more than your person. You are true self, you are essence, you are divine, you are connecting to true joy. You are that somehow enlightened person which is already inside of you. So you become more, in a natural way, more who you are. And we forgot that potential. So rebalancing and deep body work helps you to connect to that source, to that potential inside. My message is believing in yourself, believing in your full potential as a human being, that you are divine and nothing less. You are able to live that divinity in a physical body. We are able, as a human being in physical form, to through the senses, that we can connect to our environment. And it's a big joy to have senses and to experience through the senses and experience life through the senses. What a gift that is, and what a joy.
Currently, Blazer's website is available only in the Dutch language, but he communicates well in English, so any who may feel interested in reaching out to Blazer for more information or to book a session can do so from his web page, and the links will appear in the show transcript for this story. Just before getting into this week's final words, I'd like to put out the request again that CVN is in need of financial assistance at this time. So if there are any listeners who feel a calling to support this service, your help at this time is most graciously appreciated. In this week's final words, the question in the minds of many who are awakening at this time, and even those who have been awake for years or even decades, is arguably this one: why am I not creating the life I am desiring? There are possibly several answers to this question, depending upon the individual. It may not yet be time for that individual to have that experience, because there are still lessons that need to be learned. Or the individual may not be fully connected in awareness with a strong heart-mind connection. Or the individual is more focused on the physical and the material and is neglecting the power within and also beyond oneself. Or the soul is choosing, for whatever other reasons, to be at that density of vibration. Those are at least 4, although possibly there may be a few others. We are approaching a period of time, and arguably have already been in a period of time, of great revelations and transformation. As well, we note the increasing desperation of the global cabal to distract us from the spiritual tools within ourselves and keep us stuck in lower vibrations through fear, separation, debt, and technology. So many people around the world right now are, for example, addicted to websites proclaiming a certain experience will be coming, called a currency exchange. I have been aware of this for many years, and yes, I even did buy a small amount of currency, believing that this was going to happen. It may happen, or it may not. But what if, for a moment, we consider that the financial events, or the alleged financial events, are part of the trap? The internet was part of the trap as well, to get humans addicted to everything except finding the truth about everything. This is now starting to backfire on the global cabal. We have come to learn how tricky this global cabal has been in the past. We are seeing how desperate and tricky they are in this lifetime, and how they fund both sides of conflicts and easily turn people on each other in order to fulfill their agenda for domination of the planet and the ultimate enslavement and control of humanity. This global cabal, however, is still not the full story, however. This cabal entity is merely the public face of a much more secretive group of individuals who are not known to the public. This is another rabbit hole for another day for those choosing to go down that hole. This global cabal, along with its partners, are no longer winning this time, however, and it has been argued that there are other forces and energies that are assisting on the levels that they are allowed to do so, at least for now. The world has become addicted to technologies once again, and people continue to demand more and faster technologies. The global cabal keeps giving us what we want, without telling us that what we want is also killing us and benefiting them. A few weeks back, I asked listeners to picture our Earth being on a road moving in one direction. The Earth, as I currently think I understand it, is splitting into different versions of itself. The process of this splitting is the experience many are now calling 4D, or fourth density. This is where the energies of both a lower density, third density vibration and a higher density, fifth density reality have the potential to be experienced. Both can be experienced within this 4D space of existence. Is all the talk about currency exchange and the release of more technologies, are they mere distractions to keep people from focusing on the approaching energies that will assist humanity and our planet into moving more fully into a fifth density reality? If so, those who are addicted to technology-controlled, money-driven world may be falling into a final trap that draws a soul away from the experience of ascension. Becoming aware of the possible trap may, hopefully, keep some people from falling into the trap, if and when such a time ever comes. There are souls here that are very young, and they will not ascend because their journey is to go through another cycle around the galactic sun. One friend describes to me that the 5D Earth is known as Terra, and the 7D, or seventh density Earth, is known as Gaia. I am open to the possibility that there is truth in this. Consider this. There were some prophecies that spoke of 1,000 years of a golden age. Now, that may be true, but what about the remaining 25,000 years of the next 26,000 year cycle? It could end up being much like what we have already experienced. I'm starting to observe that this illusion humanity has been trapped in may actually go deeper, even deeper than what many of us may think we know at this time. It is starting to come to me that a time is approaching when we are going to have to choose the reality that we want to live in. We might be tricked into thinking that the golden age will have financial abundance and technologies for all. Yes, it might even be good for 1,000 years or so, until things get dark again. Consider also this. Where are you choosing to put your focus? If your new Earth is dependent upon financial changes and new technologies, is it possible that you may be lured into repeating another 26,000 year cycle by choosing the 1,000 years of golden age? There is nothing wrong with this if this is what your soul has chosen to do. Many, however, will be tricked into going this path in the same way humanity has been tricked into surrendering our rights and freedoms to be enslaved to commercial rules and privileges. Is it possible to perhaps shift one's focus into simply envisioning a pristine Earth with a human species that is awake and aware, and living in ways that do not require money as we currently know it, or technologies as we currently know them. Depending upon where one's focus is, one may create a new planet of financial wealth and incredible technologies, including transhumanism and a merging of humans with machines. Another may envision a new Earth that has many other things while creating a different kind of abundance, but still an abundance that fulfills one in life. In this fourth density Earth we are currently experiencing, we are seeing the potential for several types of reality to manifest. One may be a new world where finances and technologies will be keys to the future on one version of the world. We, or at least those who are open to looking for it, are also witnessing signs of a profound shift in consciousness and awakening to the fact that materialism does not create happiness, nor does it guarantee security. The trap may be in selecting a world where we are dependent upon looking at external things to provide for our well-being, or we can choose a world where external things are not needed for survival because we will be manifesting all that we need on our own. Which world would you rather choose to be a part of? You may wish to consider this a lot, and very quickly. Where are you choosing to put your focus? Personally, I am trying to put as much of my focus as possible on the fifth density Earth, and I see abundance flowing in different and more beautiful ways than the current third density or fourth density systems we are currently experiencing. A close personal friend of mine has now revealed to me that she is ready to come out and start serving more publicly at this time. I have mentioned material I have received from her in the past without mentioning her by name. Her name is Christina Mahler, and she describes herself as an adept shamanic practitioner. She has been doing extensive inner work, and she also does extensive work for others with her shamanic practices. She has been coming across a lot of information from many different sources, and she has begun connecting a few dots of her own as to how this whole process may unfold. In about 2 weeks' time, I will be doing some work with her, and although part of this work is related to addressing issues in my world personally, we will also be doing some work that I hope we will be able to share publicly on the newscast. We are going to explore more deeply this process that is being described as ascension, and we will explore also parts of the Hopi prophecy that describe what is called the blue kachina. Christina believes that this blue kachina may be, or is at least connected to, a particular celestial event that is going to supercharge the bodies of those who are ready to receive it, to lift their bodies to the minimum 5-strand DNA activation needed to move into the ascension experience. We will begin to explore galactic cycles, what is currently happening on Earth, and why things that are not of integrity are being exposed at this time. Christina is busy working with individual clients, but also doing some group work, as well as drumming classes and more. She has said to me that she is able to take a few more clients, and if there are any CVN listeners who are wanting to work with an individual doing shamanic practical work, she can assist with soul retrieval, extractions, divinations, death and dying, power animal retrieval, healing with spiritual light, and more. On top of her shamanic healing work, she also offers workshops relating to shamanic journeying, as well as the fundamentals of shamanism. Shifting your energies will contribute to having an easier journey when the blue kachina arrives. Her website is thespiritgate.com and is available in both English and German. Links to both web pages, along with her contact details, will also be in the show transcript for the final words. If things are not manifesting according to your desires right now, and you are seeking some guidance, I can recommend Christina. Create a fantastic week Until our next moment of now. So, that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show transcript, which is also on the website. CVN can be found and followed through numerous social media sites. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It is about learning to dance in the rain. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.